The served here is simple, often the humblest of foods. On many days, it is pottage, a thick gray stew of beans, peas, or lentils, boiled until soft, flavored perhaps with leeks or herbs from the garden. Bread is coarse, dark, baked from rye or barley, its crust hard, its crumb dense. On fasting days, there is no meat, only fish, dried or salted, laid plainly in bowls. Cheese may appear, pale and firm, cut into thin slices. Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, I invite you to drift with me into the world of medieval times. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and imagine the glow of candlelight on rough wooden tables, the scent of bread and smoke in the air. Here, history is not loud, but gentle, a soft murmur of the past. Stay with me, and together we'll explore why food, in those distant centuries, was so very different, and often not so pleasant. And so, let us step further, into the quiet of a medieval village kitchen. Imagine, for a moment, the low hum of life around you. The walls are built of wattle and daub, uneven and rough beneath your fingertips, their surface cool with the damp of the evening. A faint draft slips through the cracks, carrying with it the smell of earth, straw, and smoke. At the center, a hearth glows faintly, its fire never truly extinguished, for warmth and flame are the very heart of this home. The logs crackle softly, breaking the silence with gentle sighs, while smoke curls upward toward the darkened thatch roof, escaping through a simple hole above. That smoke clings to everything, your hair, your clothes, the very walls. To live here is to live wrapped in its embrace. A woman kneels by the fire, her hands dusted white with coarse flour. The grain has been ground not at a fine mill, but by rough stone querns, and so the flour is gray, flecked with husks. She presses it together with water drawn from the village well, forming a dense, heavy dough. There is no soft yeast to lift it, no gentle air to make it light. Instead, it will harden into something like stone, bread that can last for days, even weeks, but must often be soaked in broth or ale before teeth can bear it. Listen closely, and you may hear the sound of the wooden paddle scraping the dough across a flat stone surface, the dull thud as it is placed near the embers. Bread, in this century, is not the soft comfort we know now. It is survival itself, hard and filling, sometimes sour, sometimes faintly bitter from poorly stored grain. Around her, the kitchen is more a space of necessity than of comfort. A single iron pot hangs over the fire, its sides blackened by years of soot. Within it, something simple simmers, a broth of leeks, onions, perhaps a cabbage leaf or two. Meat is rare here, too costly for most. The scent is sharp, earthy, a fragrance both nourishing and plain. On a rough-hewn shelf rests yesterday's bread, already stale, its crust dark and unyielding. Children chew it slowly, their small teeth working hard, their eyes gazing toward the pot, waiting for broth to soften the hard edges. Even so, there is warmth in this place, warmth of family, of shared survival, of hands working together in the dim glow. If you listen deeper still, you may hear the quiet chorus of life beyond the walls, the bleating of a goat tethered nearby, the muffled footsteps of neighbors across the dirt path, the faint toll of a church bell calling out the hour of prayer. All of it wraps the kitchen in a rhythm older than memory, steady and unchanging. And you are seated quietly in the corner, wrapped in a woolen cloak, the coarse fibers scratching gently against your skin. You watch the firelight dance upon the walls, each flicker a reminder of time's slow passage. The bread bakes, the broth simmers, the night deepens. It is in such kitchens that much of medieval life unfolded. Not grand, not abundant, but steady. Bread, broth, ale, and the endless work of hands. This was the food of the common folk, the daily rhythm of their survival. The bread is placed closer to the fire now. You can hear it hiss faintly, as the damp dough meets the hot stone. The air fills with a smell at once comforting and coarse, a smell of grain and ash, earthy and faintly sour. To a hungry villager, this aroma is a promise, though the bread itself will be hard, heavy, and dry. Children gather near, their bare feet padding softly against the packed earth floor. They whisper and fidget, watching their mother's hands, waiting for that first bite. Hunger is a familiar companion here, and bread, even when tough and dark, is treasure. Near the wall, a wooden bucket holds yesterday's ale, cloudy and warm, with bits of grain still floating within. This ale is not the sharp, golden drink you may imagine, but a heavy, yeasty liquid, safer than water, and filling in its own right. It has a sour tang that bites at the tongue, and yet it is drunk daily, even by children, for thirst knows no age. The hearth, though small, is alive with its own music, the pop and crackle of wood, the low simmer of broth, the creak of the iron hook swaying as the pot shifts gently. Shadows dance across the walls, stretching tall and thin, like silent figures keeping watch. I run my hand across the rough table, its surface scarred by years of use, cut and burned by knives and hot pots. It is not polished wood, but raw, splintered oak. Upon it rests a small knife, its blade dull, its handle worn smooth by countless meals. With such a tool, bread is carved into thick, uneven hunks, not slices as we know them today. The air is thick, too, with scents beyond the bread. There is the sharpness of onion, the sweetness of carrot, the pungent bite of leek. There is also the faint but ever-present smell of smoke, which clings to hair, to skin, to fabric. In such a kitchen, you never escape the fire's breath. And yet, despite the plainness of it all, there is comfort here. Comfort in the routine, in the quiet rhythm of chopping, stirring, waiting. Comfort in knowing that the pot will yield something warm, even if simple. The evening stretches on, and the first loaf is ready. It is drawn from the hearth with careful hands, its crust blackened and hard. A knife strikes against it with a dull crack, breaking it open to reveal a dense, steaming core. The smell is sharper now, rich with grain, alive with heat. Children reach eagerly, tearing at the bread with small hands. I take a piece as well. It is heavy in my palm, rough to the touch. As I bite, it is hard, almost unyielding. Yet slowly it softens as warmth spreads across my tongue. The flavor is earthy, nutty, touched with a faint bitterness. It is not pleasure, but sustenance. This is the meal of the common folk, bread, broth, and ale. Day after day, year after year, the same pattern repeats. And though it may seem dull, even poor, it is life. Life held together by grain and fire, by the work of hands, by the patience of waiting. The kitchen grows quiet now. Outside, the sounds of the village drift closer. Voices calling, a cart creaking, the distant bark of a dog. Night has settled fully, and with it comes the end of the day's labors. Soon, families will gather by the hearth, tearing bread, dipping it into broth, sipping warm ale. And yet, beyond this kitchen, beyond this small circle of warmth, another world stirs. In the village alehouse, the night is louder, busier, filled with voices and laughter and the clatter of mugs. If the kitchen is the heart of the home, the alehouse is the heart of the village. Shall we step outside into the cool night air and make our way there? Step with me now, out from the smoky kitchen and into the cool evening air. The sky above is dark, the stars faint and scattered, a pale moon drifting between clouds. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, the dirt path soft with mud after the day's rain. Each step makes a gentle squelch, and the night carries with it the scent of damp earth, straw, and animals settling into their pens. Ahead, a glow appears, warm and golden, flickering through a crooked wooden doorway. The sound reaches us first, a low hum of voices, a burst of laughter, the dull thud of mugs meeting a heavy table. It is the village alehouse, its timber frame leaning with age, its thatched roof sagging, yet alive with cheer and noise. As we push open the door, the world changes. The quiet of the night is replaced by warmth, by closeness, by a swirl of scents and sounds. The air is thick, almost heavy, filled with the mingling of smoke, sweat, spilled ale, and the faint tang of roasted meat. The fire on the hearth blazes brighter than any in the cottages, its heat wrapping around us like a thick cloak. Wooden benches line the room, their surfaces sticky with years of use. Men and women sit shoulder to shoulder, their clothes simple, their hands rough from labor. A boy moves among them, carrying a clay jug sloshing with ale, filling mugs as quickly as they are drained. The sound of liquid pouring is constant, a steady rhythm against the chatter. The ale itself is cloudy, yeasty, almost thick. It foams unevenly as it is poured, leaving streaks down the sides of mugs. When you lift it, the smell is sour, sharp, almost bready. As you sip, it fills the mouth with heaviness, not refreshment. And yet it warms the body, loosens the tongue, eases the ache of long days spent in field and toil. Listen, hear the scrape of chairs, the thump of mugs against wood, the clatter of dice tumbling across a table. Someone strums a crude fiddle in the corner, its notes uneven but cheerful. Voices rise and fall, some deep and booming, others slurred and laughing, all weaving together into a tapestry of sound. The walls are darkened by soot, their beams heavy with age. Above, the smoke gathers thickly, stinging the eyes, yet no one seems to mind. This is the place of release, the heart of the village at night. Here, gossip is traded like coin, songs are shared, and the worries of hunger and hardship are, for a brief moment, softened. At the far end of the room, a woman ladles stew into wooden bowls. Its smell drifts across the alehouse, rich with onions, salted pork bones, and the fat of marrow. The broth is greasy, the vegetables boiled until soft. Yet, for many, it is the richest taste they will know all week. And here you sit, among them, the wooden bench hard beneath you, the mug heavy in your hand. The warmth of the fire paints your skin, the sound of laughter surrounds you, and the taste of sour ale lingers on your tongue. For a moment, the hardships of life, hard bread, endless toil, long winters, fade away. In their place is this, a simple gathering, loud and alive, where food and drink, however coarse, bind the people together. The air inside the alehouse presses close, warm and heavy against your skin, so unlike the chill that lingers outside. It is not a clean warmth, but one filled with the smell of bodies, smoke, and spilt drink. The fire roars in the hearth, sending waves of heat that lick across the room, and you feel beads of sweat form at your temples, even as the door behind you lets in an occasional draft of cool night air. Your eyes adjust slowly to the glow. The light here is uneven. Candles burned down to stubs drip wax across warped wooden holders, and the flames of the hearth leap and fall, throwing shadows that dance against the walls. Faces flicker in and out of view, their features shifting with the play of light. One moment solemn, the next alight with laughter. A man near the fire raises his mug high, shouting a toast in a voice hoarse from drink. Foam spills down the side of the cup and onto his rough woolen tunic, leaving dark patches on the fabric. Those around him cheer, their voices rising together, filling the room with a brief chorus of sound before falling again into the steady hum of talk. A group of laborers sit hunched over a table, their shoulders stooped, their hands thick and calloused. They toss small bones across the table, playing at chance, the clatter of each throw mixing with the scrape of mugs. One man slaps the table with a laugh, his face red with drink, while another groans at his loss, clutching his cup for comfort. Nearby, a woman with flushed cheeks moves among the benches, her apron already stained with spilled ale. She carries a heavy jug, filling cups with quick, practiced motions. Each time she lifts the jug, her arms strain with the weight, yet she does not falter. The ale splashes as it pours, leaving the air thick with its sour, grainy scent. You lift your own mug once more. The wood is rough against your lips, the rim uneven, worn smooth in some places, splintered in others. The liquid within is warm, thick, slightly gritty. It tastes of yeast, of barley left to sour, of the earth itself. It does not refresh so much as it dulls, warming your stomach, making your limbs heavy. From the corner comes the sound of a fiddle. Its strings squeak and scratch, yet a tune emerges, uneven but cheerful. A few voices join in song, ragged but heartfelt, rising above the noise of the room. Their words are simple, a ballad of love and labor, a tune passed down through countless mouths, shaped and reshaped with each generation. The walls of the alehouse seem to bend inward, low and close. The beams above your head are dark with age, their surfaces rough, their edges coated in soot. A layer of smoke hangs beneath the thatch, caught between roof and room, thick enough that it blurs the outlines of faces. You taste it when you breathe, bitter and acrid, clinging to the back of your throat. On the far side, a large cauldron sits over a smaller hearth, bubbling quietly. A woman stirs it with a wooden spoon, taller than a child, her movements slow and steady. The smell of stew drifts outward. Onions boiled down until sweet, cabbage softened until limp, and the faint, savory hint of bone marrow dissolving into the broth. Meat is rare, but its essence lingers in the liquid, a richness that lifts the otherwise plain dish. Bowls are ladled out, their contents steaming. Wooden spoons scrape against wood. Soft thuds echo as bowls are set upon tables. When you bring one to your lips, the heat rises first, warming your face. The taste is salty, oily, carrying the sharpness of onion and the faint sweetness of carrot. A thin layer of grease clings to the surface, coating your mouth, and yet it comforts, easing hunger. The room itself is alive with small sounds that weave together into a lull of noise. The creak of benches as people shift, the dull thump of mugs striking wood, the shuffle of feet across the floor scattered with straw. A cough here, a laugh there, the faint murmur of a private conversation. Each sound rises, blends, and fades, like waves upon a shore. You glance toward the doorway. Now and then, it opens, letting in a rush of night air. A traveler steps inside, shaking off the damp, his cloak heavy with dew. He pauses, blinking against the sudden brightness, before making his way to the warmth, to the noise, to the drink. The door closes, and the alehouse swallows him whole. The night deepens. The laughter grows louder, the songs rougher, the movements slower. Some lean heavily against the table, their mugs empty, their voices slurred. Others sit quietly, their eyes half closed, content to watch the fire burn low. The alehouse becomes a cocoon, a place apart from the cold and hunger of the world outside. And you sit within it, part of its rhythm, listening to the hum of voices, the scrape of wood, the fiddle's uneven tune. Your eyelids grow heavy with the warmth, with the weight of bread and ale and stew. For a moment, it feels as though time itself has slowed, the night stretching longer, softer, endless. And yet, beyond this place, beyond this humble hall of smoke and laughter, there are tables far grander, tables laden with meats and spices, lit by shining candles, filled with nobles and lords. Their food is richer, stranger, more dazzling, and sometimes just as disappointing. Shall we leave this alehouse behind and step into the world of the Lord's table? Step with me now, out from the noise of the alehouse, into the stillness of night once more. The path beneath our feet winds upward, leading toward the manor that overlooks the village. The air is cooler here, touched with damp earth and the faint sweetness of hay. Far above, the The sky is vast, the moon pale and watchful, its light falling across the fields like silver dust. Before long, the manor rises before us, its stone walls looming, its tall windows glimmering faintly with candlelight. Where the cottages were low and rough, this place feels heavy, solid, commanding. The great door creaks as it opens, and we step inside. At once, the smell changes. Here, the air is thick, not with smoke and sweat, but with roasted meat, hot wax, and the faint, spicy note of cloves. The hall is vast, its ceiling high, beams blackened by age, yet grand in their sweep. Tapestries hang along the walls, their threads worn but bright with scenes of hunting and battle. At the center stretches a long table of oak, polished by years of hands and elbows, by knives and plates. Upon it, candles burn in tall iron holders, their flames steady, casting pools of warm golden light. Shadows lean long across the floor, flickering with each soft draft. The Lord sits at the head, his chair tall-backed and carved, his robes trimmed with fur. Around him gather his household, family, retainers, guests of favor. Their clothes are brighter than those of the villagers, wool dyed deep red or blue, linen bleached pale, embroidery glinting faintly in the candlelight. Before them lies the meal. Great platters of meat, roasted venison, glistening pork, and birds stuffed with herbs send their scents into the air. The smell is rich, oily, heavy. Fat drips down the sides of the cuts, pooling upon the wooden trenchers that serve as plates. Knives cut into flesh, tearing with effort, while juices soak into the bread that lies beneath. Ah, the bread. Unlike the coarse, dark loaves of the village, this is manchet. Pale, fine, sifted of its husks. It is softer, whiter, though still dense by our measure. Each piece serves not only as food, but as plate, absorbing grease and sauce, later tossed aside or given to servants and beggars at the gate. The sounds of the hall are many. Knives scrape against wood, goblets clink, voices rise in conversation, punctuated by the occasional bark of laughter. Dogs linger near the benches, their claws clicking against the floor, their eyes fixed on scraps that fall. A servant hurries past, jug in hand, refilling cups with wine, dark as blood, brought from lands far beyond the sea. Yet for all its richness, the meal is not always pleasant. The meat, though plentiful, is often salted or spiced to hide the taste of age. The sauces are thick, sharp with vinegar, or sour with wine, flavored with the precious spices that mark wealth: pepper, cinnamon, ginger. To some, the taste is dazzling, but to others, it is overwhelming, a mask that hides the food's true nature. Still, the hall glows with its own grandeur. Music drifts from the corner, the soft pluck of a lute, the thin, high note of a pipe. The melody weaves gently through the voices, a thread of refinement amid the clatter. Servants move silently, trained in their steps, eyes lowered, hands steady as they set down more dishes. Pies with hard crusts, fish drenched in sauce, bowls of stewed fruit heavy with honey. You sit quietly along the edge, watching the display. The heat of the hearth behind you warms your back, while the smell of spice and meat lingers in the air. A goblet is pressed into your hand, its rim cool, its contents sharp upon the tongue, far stronger than the ale of the village. It burns as it goes down, leaving warmth in its wake. Here, food is not only survival, it is power, a show of wealth, a signal of one's place in the world. Each dish speaks of trade with distant lands, of fields hunted and claimed, of labor drawn from those who toil beyond these walls. And yet, as you watch, as you taste, as you breathe in the heavy scents, you sense a truth. Even here, among lords and ladies, food does not always delight. It fills, it impresses, it displays. But it is not always comfort. Sometimes, beneath the candlelight and the music, it feels heavy, strange, even wearying. So let us pause, here in this hall of stone and fire, rest in the glow of candles and the sound of laughter, and the weight of history around you. Soon, we will move again, beyond the manor's walls, into the world of fasting and faith, of fish and Fridays. From the warmth of the Lord's Hall, let us step once more into the quiet corridors of time. The air cools as the heavy doors close behind us, and the night greets us with silence. Yet beyond the feasting tables and the alehouses, there is another rhythm of eating, one shaped not by hunger alone, nor by wealth, but by faith. In the world of the Middle Ages, the calendar is marked not only by seasons, but by saints, by fasts, and by the sacred order of the Church. And so, on Fridays, and on many holy days besides, the rules of eating change. Flesh, beef, pork, fowl, is set aside. Instead, the table turns toward fish. At dawn, the smell reaches you first, not the fresh, briny scent of the sea, but something heavier, more sour. Fish must travel far to reach the inland villages, carried in barrels packed with salt, or hung from hooks to dry in the open air. By the time it arrives, its flesh is tough, its taste sharp, its presence more a duty than a delight. In the village kitchen, a pot of salted herring boils. The steam rises, carrying with it a pungent, salty fog that fills the small space, clinging to the rafters. The fish is gray, its skin breaking apart in the water, its bones brittle. A handful of leeks or onions may be added to soften the taste, but the sharpness remains. Children chew slowly, wrinkling their noses, yet they eat, for to leave food is unthinkable. In monasteries, the rule is stricter still. Rows of monks sit in silence at long wooden tables, bowls before them, their heads bowed as prayers are spoken. The fish is laid out simply, eels caught from nearby rivers, or dried cod brought from the coast. The taste is plain, the meal humble, for the body must be subdued, not indulged. Each bite is taken with care, chewed slowly, swallowed without complaint. The sound of spoons against bowls is the only music in the hall. Yet for the wealthy, even fasting becomes a stage for display. At the Lord's table, fish is dressed in sauces thick with spice, roasted whole and carried upon silver platters. Pies filled with lampreys, slippery, eel-like creatures prized by nobles, are baked in golden crusts, their richness defying the spirit of restraint. On these days, the hall smells not of meat, but of saffron and cinnamon, of fish masked by the wealth of distant trade. The difference is sharp. For some, fish is a hardship, a meal endured. For others, it is a chance to show power, to bend even fasting into luxury. But for all, it is a rhythm that repeats, week after week, season after season, shaping the very taste of life in medieval times. Listen closely now. You may hear the crack of salt being scraped from barrels, the splash of water as fish is rinsed, the hiss of it laid upon hot stones. You may smell the heavy salt, the smoke of oak or beech used to dry the flesh, the sharp vinegar poured to preserve it. These are the scents of faith, the scents of survival, the scents of Friday. And as the day ends, and the last fish is eaten, there is relief. Tomorrow, meat may return. But tonight, the memory of fish lingers, salty, smoky, stubborn, on every tongue. Close your eyes now, and let us drift from the gray salt of Friday fish toward something brighter, rarer, almost magical. Imagine a single grain of pepper, small and black, rolling in the palm of your hand. Imagine the warm red threads of saffron, light as air, glowing like tiny embers. Imagine cinnamon, curled into tight brown spirals, its fragrance sweet and woody. In the medieval world, these were not common kitchen flavors. They were treasures, rarities, worth their weight in silver. For the villagers, the taste of food was shaped by salt, onions, leeks, and coarse bread. But in dreams, in whispers, and in stories carried along the roads of merchants, came tales of spices, of flavors that could transform even the dullest broth into something wondrous. The journey of these spices was long, stretching across deserts and seas. Caravans moved slowly under the sun, camels swaying with loads of peppercorns and cloves. Ships rocked upon restless waters, their wooden hulls heavy with sacks of ginger and nutmeg. By the time they reached the harbors of Europe, months, sometimes years, had passed. And so their price was high, their presence rare. Step with me into a medieval market. The air is alive with noise, traders shouting, coins clinking, the smell of animals and smoke drifting thick. And in one corner, beneath a canopy of rough cloth, a merchant lays out his treasures. Tiny packets wrapped in parchment, jars sealed with wax, their contents no bigger than a handful, yet each one more precious than a bushel of wheat. Lean closer. Breathe in. The pepper is sharp, tickling the nose, making you almost sneeze. The cinnamon is warm, its scent like sweet wood smoke curling from a hearth. The saffron glows golden, and when touched to broth, it turns the liquid to sunlight. Each smell is a dream, each taste a glimpse into lands far beyond the village fields. The wealthy buy freely, turning their meals into feasts of color and fragrance. In the Lord's Hall, roasted meats are sprinkled with cinnamon and cloves, fish is dressed in sauces rich with ginger, and pies are golden, not only with butter, but with saffron's glow. Guests marvel, their tongues alive with new sensations, their minds full of wonder at the faraway lands from which such flavors came. But for the poor, spices are almost myths. A peppercorn, if ever it reaches the cottage, is treasured, sometimes sewn into a pouch as a charm rather than eaten. Stories are told of the spice islands, of dragons said to guard the cinnamon trees, of merchants who risk their lives for these tiny fragments of taste. Spices are not only food, they are dreams, symbols of worlds unseen. Listen. Can you hear the market? The murmur of bargaining, the rustle of coins, the soft rattle as a merchant tips a few peppercorns into a buyer's palm. Can you see the faint dust of saffron floating in the air, catching the light, golden as dawn? Can you feel the small weight of cinnamon between your fingers, its bark rough, its curl delicate? These were the colors and perfumes of medieval imagination. They traveled in whispers, in stories, in rare tastes upon the tongue. They were tokens of wealth, of power, of longing. And in their glow, the simple food of the Middle Ages, coarse bread, salted fish, hard cheese, seemed, if only for a moment, touched by magic. Let us leave behind the golden threads of saffron, the fragrant curls of cinnamon, and step instead into the darker shadow of medieval life. For though feasts and spices belonged to the few, hunger belonged to many. Picture the village in a harsh winter. The sky is low and gray, the air sharp and biting. The fields lie bare, the earth frozen, the barns nearly empty. Bread is thinner now, stretched with barley or oats, sometimes even ground with peas or acorns to make it last. The loaves are dense, coarse, bitter on the tongue. Yet still, they are not enough. At dawn, you hear the groan of a stomach not fed. Children wake not to laughter, but to quiet whimpers, their hands clutching at their bellies. The smell of food is faint, sometimes nothing more than the acrid smoke of an empty pot on the hearth. Mothers scrape what they can from the bottom of barrels, a spoonful of gruel here, a handful of dried beans there. The fire crackles weakly, offering warmth, but little comfort. Step outside. The village well is still, its water rimmed with ice. Chickens scratch at frozen dirt, their bodies thin. A cow lows softly in the distance, ribs showing beneath its hide. The silence of hunger is heavy. It muffles voices, slows footsteps, presses against every movement. Even the church bells, when they ring, seem duller, swallowed by the cold air. In years of plenty, hunger lingers, but never conquers. In years of famine, it becomes a shadow that touches every home. Too much rain drowns the grain, too little withers it. A single bad harvest can turn to 2, 3. And soon the fear of hunger becomes worse than the hunger itself. People search where they can. Nettles and wild herbs are boiled into soups, their taste bitter but filling. Bark is stripped from trees, dried and ground into powder to thicken bread. Sometimes rumors spread of darker things, of animals stolen in the night, of strangers blamed for poisoning wells, of famine turning neighbor against neighbor. Listen closely now. Can you hear the empty rattle of a grain sack as it is lifted, only dust falling to the ground? Can you smell the faint bitterness of boiled weeds, thin broth steaming from a cracked clay pot? Can you feel the hollowness in the body, the weakness in the limbs, the slow drag of days stretched thin by hunger? And yet, even in famine, life clings. The community gathers in prayer, voices low, candles flickering weakly in the church. Songs are sung not in joy, but in hope. Each mouthful, however small, is shared, for survival depends not on one, but on all. Hunger shaped the medieval world as surely as walls and castles did. It reminded every villager, every noble, every monk, that food was never certain, that each harvest was a gamble against the sky. And when famine passed, when bread once more filled the ovens and meat once more sizzled over fires, the memory of emptiness remained. It is in that memory that food, however coarse, however plain, gained its weight. For in a world so often haunted by hunger, every crumb was precious. Step with me now, away from the silence of hunger, and into the bustle of the medieval market. The moment we enter, the air is alive, full of sound, full of scent, full of motion. The cobbled streets are narrow, lined with stalls of rough wood, their canopies patched with linen. The voices of sellers rise like a chorus, deep shouts, sharp cries, sing-song calls to draw the crowd. Coins jingle in pouches, wheels creak as carts pass, chickens cluck and flap in wicker cages. Every sound layers upon the next, until the market hums like a living thing. The smells are even stronger. Roasting meat crackles on open braziers, its fat dripping and hissing into fire. Fresh bread lies stacked in baskets, its crust dark, its scent warm and earthy, carried by the wind. Spiced pies release a savory perfume, while fish, both fresh and salted, fills the air with a sharper tang. All around, smoke, sweat, hay, and dung mix together, a true perfume of the medieval street. Now imagine the taste of street food here, a skewer of roasted meat, charred at the edges, salty and hot. A small pie filled with minced pork or spiced vegetables, its crust flaky, its filling steaming. A mug of thin ale, sour but cool, washing it down. For a few coins, a passerby may hold in his hands a moment of fullness, a pocket of warmth in the day. Children dart between legs, nibbling on apples candied in honey, or chewing bread rolls still warm from the oven. Dogs nose about for scraps, their tails wagging as bones are tossed into the dirt. Above, cloth merchants unfurl bolts of colored fabric, while spice sellers guard their tiny jars like treasures. The street is not just a place of trade. It is the heartbeat of the city. Listen, hear the rattle of scales as a merchant weighs cheese, the crack of a loaf being broken, the sudden laughter of a customer haggling over onions. Hear the ring of a blacksmith's hammer from just beyond, mingling with the calls of fish, fresh fish, echoing across the square. See the colors, the deep green of herbs tied in bundles, the pale yellow of butter pressed into wooden molds, the rich brown of chestnuts roasting in iron pans. Even in a world of hunger and famine, here, for those with coin, life feels abundant. And yet, markets were not only about food. They were gathering places, centers of news, spaces where stories and songs were exchanged. A traveler might share word of distant wars. A minstrel might sing for his supper. A beggar might stretch out a hand, hoping for bread. All of life, hunger, wealth, joy, sorrow, mingled in these streets. For you, standing here, the bench is rough beneath your hand, the mug heavy, the pie hot in your palm. The crowd presses close, voices in every direction, and the smell of food lingers thick in the air. The market is overwhelming, but it is alive in a way the quiet of the countryside never could be. And when the day ends and the stalls close, the market square is littered with straw, trampled vegetables, and the faint glow of embers from dying fires. Yet the memory of its noise, its scents, its flavors remains, a reminder that even in the Middle Ages, food was not just survival. It was community. Let us step now from the noisy streets of the market into a world of quiet stone walls and hushed corridors. The monastery rises above the village like a fortress of prayer, its bells marking the hours, its cloisters echoing with the soft shuffle of sandals against worn flagstones. Here, food is not feast, nor even comfort. It is discipline. It is a measure of time, a rhythm of faith. The refectory, the dining hall, is long and narrow, its walls bare stone, its windows tall and narrow, letting in shafts of pale light. Wooden tables stretch in rows, their surfaces scarred by years of use, their benches polished by countless hours of sitting. At the head, a lectern stands, where a monk reads aloud scripture as the others eat in silence. The meal begins with prayer. Heads bow, hands fold, voices murmur in unison, rising like a low hum that fills the hall. Then, with no further word, bowls are filled, spoons lifted, and the quiet sound of eating begins. What is served here is simple, often the humblest of foods. On many days, it is pottage, a thick, gray stew of beans, peas, or lentils, boiled until soft, flavored perhaps with leeks or herbs from the garden. Bread is coarse, dark, baked from rye or barley, its crust hard, its crumb dense. On fasting days, there is no meat, only fish, dried or salted, laid plainly in bowls. Cheese may appear, pale and firm, cut into thin slices. Listen closely. The scrape of wooden spoons against clay bowls, the faint crack of crust being broken, the slow rhythm of chewing. Each sound is soft, steady, measured. No laughter rises here. No chatter fills the air. The only voice is that of the reader, reciting passages of scripture, his words weaving with the rhythm of the meal. The air is cool, carrying the faint smell of cooked beans, of baked bread, of smoke clinging to habits from the kitchen fire. Candles flicker along the walls, their wax dripping slowly, their light golden but dim. Each monk eats slowly, carefully, not to indulge, but to sustain. In this world, food is not pleasure. It is humility. To eat is to fuel the body for prayer, for labor, for devotion. Even a taste is part of discipline, plain, bland, stripped of spice or richness. Hunger itself is a teacher here, a reminder that the body is weak, the soul eternal. And yet, within this silence, there is a kind of peace, the rhythm of the meals, the simplicity of flavors, the absence of excess, all bring a stillness that the clamor of village kitchens and lordly halls never could. When the bowls are emptied, prayers are spoken again. Hands fold, heads bow. The monks rise together, their benches scraping softly against the stone floor, and return to their duties. The refectory grows quiet once more, only the faint smell of stew lingering, only the candle flames trembling in the draught. In monasteries, food was not about satisfaction, but about balance. Not about abundance, but about discipline. And in that discipline, there was a calm, a rhythm, a gentleness that carried the monks through the passing of days and seasons. Step with me now, out of the silence of the monastery, and into the blaze of color and sound that fills the medieval feast hall. For if hunger and discipline shaped much of daily life, so too did its opposite, moments of abundance, when the doors of the Lord's Hall opened wide, and the village gathered in celebration. The hall is vast, its timber beams soaring high above, its walls hung with tapestries that shimmer in firelight. At the center, a long table stretches, laden with food beyond measure. Torches flare, candles burn in iron sconces, and the glow dances across silver cups and golden dishes. The air itself is thick with warmth, heavy with the mingled scents of roasting meat, sweet pies, and spiced wine. Listen. Hear the clatter of knives upon trenchers, the laughter that bursts from every corner, the rhythm of drums and fiddles that rise above the crowd. Feet stamp in time, hands clap, voices join together in songs that weave through the smoky air. The feast is not just a meal. It is theater, a living display of wealth, of power, of joy. Upon the tables, marvel at the dishes. Whole roasted boars, their mouths stuffed with apples, their skin crackling and golden. Peacocks served in their feathers, their bright plumes reattached after cooking, a spectacle for the eyes as much as the tongue. Pies filled with spiced venison, their crusts flaky, their fillings rich with cloves, cinnamon, and pepper. Bowls of pottage, thick with grains and meat, set beside baskets of fresh bread, still steaming from the ovens. And there, sweetmeats glisten, honey cakes, candied almonds, fritters dusted with sugar so rare that it gleams like snow. Cups overflow with ale, with mead, with wine mulled with spices that glow golden in the firelight. For the poor of the village, invited to share in the feast, this is a dream. To taste soft meat, to drink freely, to hear music echoing in the rafters. These are moments carried in memory for a lifetime. For the noble hosts, it is a display, proof of their power, their generosity, their ability to turn hunger into plenty. Step closer now. Feel the heat of the fire roaring in the great hearth, warming your face, flushing your skin. Smell the sweetness of cinnamon in the air, mixing with the savory scent of roasting meat. Hear the laughter, the songs, the stamping of feet as dancers spin, skirts swirling, hands clapping. Even outside the hall, festivals spill into the streets. Bells ring, banners flutter, markets swell with food and drink. Villagers gather for games, for dances, for contests of strength. Children run, chasing one another between stalls of roasted chestnuts and spiced cider. The air is alive with joy, with music, with the promise of food enough for all, if only for a day. And when the night grows late, when the torches burn low, and the last cups are drained, the feast lingers in the heart. For in a world so often marked by hunger and hardship, these moments of abundance are not forgotten. They are stories retold by firelight, songs sung on winter nights, dreams carried into the long seasons ahead. Now, dear listener, let us pause a moment. We have walked together through kitchens of smoke and soot, through alehouses of laughter and spilled drink, through monasteries of silence, and into feasts of fire and color. And yet, beneath it all, one truth remains. Food was never just food. It was survival. It was faith. It was power. It was memory. Take, for instance, the bread we have so often seen. To us, it may seem humble, a rough, dark loaf, dense and heavy. But in the 14th century, bread was not only nourishment, it was life itself. There were years when poor harvests blackened the grain with mold, and the bread baked from it made whole villages ill. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 is remembered still. Rain that would not stop, fields drowned, cattle dying in the mud. In those years, bread was scarce, and hunger gnawed at every door. Children starved, and even nobles felt the pangs of want. The memory of that famine lingered for generations, a shadow at every table. And then, consider the spices. They dazzled the wealthy, yes, but they also told of war and pilgrimage. The Crusades, fought far from home, brought back more than relics. They brought back flavors. Pepper, cinnamon, saffron, ginger. These were not just luxuries, but trophies of distant lands, tokens of conquest, symbols of a world suddenly wider. To taste them was to taste history itself, a story of blood and silk and ships upon stormy seas. Food also bore the mark of faith. The Friday fish, the Lenten fast, the meatless meals of monasteries. These were not only rules, but reflections of a world where heaven was never far from the hearth. To eat was to pray. To abstain was to honor God. To share was to bind the community. Even the smallest meal, plain and poor, carried a weight beyond its taste. And always, food was a mirror of class. The Lord's table groaned with roasted boar and gilded pies, while the peasant's pot boiled thin pottage from beans and roots. Between them lay the gulf of wealth and poverty, of power and weakness. Yet both tables told the same truth. Life was fragile, food was never guaranteed, and every crumb mattered. Close your eyes now, and imagine the sound of a knife cutting through bread, the crackle of fire beneath a cauldron, the murmur of prayers before a meal. Imagine the scent of smoke, of sour ale, of salted fish. Imagine the feel of a wooden spoon in your hand, smooth from years of use, heavy with broth. This is the taste of the past. Not sweet, not easy, not always pleasant. But it is real, and it is human. And as we move forward, deeper into history, we will see even more clearly how food was bound to every great event, to famine, to plague, to war, to celebration. The story of medieval food is not yet finished. It stretches further, through centuries of struggle, and carries with it lessons that echo even to our own tables today. Dear listener, let us drift together now into the chill of a rain-soaked year. The year is 1315, in the heart of medieval Europe. Imagine the sky, heavy with unending clouds, pouring its sorrow day after day, week after week. Fields that once shimmered golden with wheat are drowned in mud. The air is damp, cold, and heavy with the smell of rot. I walk with you down a village lane. The earth squelches beneath our feet, waterlogged, refusing to dry. Cattle, thin and weak, stand miserably in the mire, their ribs showing through their hides. Their breath steams in the chill morning air, yet even their strength is fading. One by one, the animals fall, and with them goes the milk, the butter, the meat. The famine has begun. Families gather in their cottages, but the hearths burn low, and the pots are nearly empty. The bread that was once dark and heavy is now worse, made from spoiled rye, streaked with fungus that sickens those who eat it. Children whimper in the night, their stomachs aching, their mothers rocking them with whispered prayers. Even the old, who have known many hard winters, shake their heads and confess that never have they seen hunger bite so deeply. The famine does not last a single season. The rain continues into the next year, and then the next. By 1316, whole villages stagger on the edge of collapse. People eat what they can: dogs, horses, roots pulled from the earth. Chronicles whisper of darker things, of desperate acts unspoken in daylight. Yet through it all, church bells still toll, monks still chant their prayers, and the faithful kneel to beg for God's mercy. By 1317, the hunger begins to ease, the skies at last showing mercy. But the scars remain. Nearly every family has lost someone. Fields are empty of both grain and laughter. The famine has written itself into memory, a wound that will not be forgotten. Close your eyes now. Hear the endless rain drumming on thatched roofs, dripping from eaves into puddles that never dry. Smell the sourness of spoiled bread, the dampness of straw, the faint smoke of too green wood struggling to burn. Feel the weight of hunger, not a sharp pang, but a dull, constant ache, as if the very body is being hollowed from within. This was the Great Famine, not a single tale, but a shadow that stretched across a continent. And it changed how people saw food forever. Every loaf baked in the years that followed carried with it the memory of loss. Every harvest brought both relief and fear, for the rain might always return. Dear listener, let us step forward in time to the middle of the 14th century. The year is 1347. And across Europe, a silent terror begins to move, carried not by storm clouds this time, but by ships. From the harbors of the Mediterranean, a sickness spreads, unseen, unstoppable. They call it the pestilence. We know it as the Black Death. Imagine walking through a village lane once filled with life. The sound of children at play, of hammers striking wood, of women laughing as they kneaded bread. All gone. The doors of cottages are shut. Windows are shuttered. The silence is heavy, broken only by the faint toll of a church bell, announcing yet another passing. Inside, tables stand bare. Bread lies untouched, for there are too few hands to bake it. Ale casks go sour, for there are no men left to tend them. Whole households vanish, leaving pots of pottage cooling on the hearth, spoons abandoned beside them. The air is thick with the scent of sickness, herbs burned to drive away the plague, vinegar splashed on walls, smoke rising from fires lit in desperate hope of cleansing the air. Picture now the empty chair at every table. A father gone, a mother gone, a child's voice missing forever. In some villages, there are more empty chairs than full ones. Chroniclers write that half of Europe's people were taken. Every meal thereafter carried absence as its silent guest. And yet, life struggled on. Where tables were left half empty, survivors gathered closer together. A widow shared her bread with an orphan. A monk poured broth into the bowl of the weak. Neighbors, who once passed one another with indifference, now clung together, bound by shared grief. Even in darkness, the act of eating became an act of defiance, proof that life, somehow, continued. Close your eyes now. Hear the silence of those abandoned streets, where only the wind moves. Smell the sharp bite of vinegar, the acrid smoke of burning herbs, the faint sweetness of apples left to rot in a deserted market stall. Feel the weight of a wooden chair beside you, empty, and the heaviness in your chest that no food can fill. This was the Black Death. Not only a plague of bodies, but of tables, of kitchens, of every hearth where once warmth and laughter had lived. And its shadow lingered for centuries. Dear listener, let us turn now from famine and plague to another current of history, one that traveled not with storms or sickness, but with armies and pilgrims, merchants and ships. The Crusades, fought across distant lands, brought back more than relics and stories of holy wars. They brought back flavors, scents, and colors that changed forever the way food was imagined in medieval Europe. Close your eyes and picture a harbor at dawn. The sea smells sharp and briny. Wooden ships creak as sailors call out, unloading barrels, sacks, and crates. From within, treasures are revealed. Dark beads of black pepper, as precious as coins. Threads of saffron, golden as sunlight. Cinnamon sticks curled like whispers of wood. Ginger roots, knobbly and fragrant. For the first time, Europe tastes the East. In the smoky halls of nobles, these spices became wonders. A roasted bird, once plain, now gleamed with saffron, its skin golden, its taste strange and exotic. Pottages thick with beans and barley bloomed with the heat of pepper. Sweetmeats, once cloying with honey, were now perfumed with cinnamon, warming the mouth like embers on a winter night. But spices were more than taste. They were symbols. To serve a dish, rich with pepper or saffron, was to declare wealth and power, to show that your reach stretched across seas and deserts. Chronicles tell of kings whose kitchens consumed more spice than an entire town could afford in a year. Each grain of pepper was a jewel, each pinch of cinnamon a treasure. And yet, beyond the glittering courts, these flavors traveled slowly down the social ladder. A merchant in a bustling town might afford a few pinches, enough to season a broth at Christmas. A monastery might purchase cloves to mix into medicinal tonics, believing them to chase away illness. In every home, where even a trace of spice appeared, it carried with it the dream of distant lands, of caravans under hot suns, of ships crossing stormy seas. Imagine now the scents filling the air, the warmth of cinnamon, the sharp sting of pepper, the floral sweetness of saffron. Imagine holding a spice jar in your hands, small, carved from wood or ivory, opened carefully, as if it held not food, but magic. The Crusades left behind scars of blood and conquest, but they also left a legacy that softened life, if only for the privileged. A glimpse of color, of fragrance, of wonder, in a world that was often gray. Food, once heavy and plain, now carried whispers of the wider world. And from then on, the medieval table was never the same. Dear listener, our journey through the kitchens and tables of the Middle Ages now comes to a gentle close. We have walked together through famine and feast, through the silence of plague and the noise of noble halls, through the damp cottages of peasants and the spice-laden banquets of kings. And in each scene, food has been more than mere sustenance. It has been a mirror of life itself. Think of the famine years, when rain drowned the fields, and every crust of bread became precious. Think of the plague, when empty chairs at the table spoke louder than any prayer. Think, too, of the Crusades, when ships returned with flavors unknown, and spices turned meals into marvels. Food was never only about taste. It was survival. It was faith. It was wealth. It was memory. To eat was to endure, to hope, to cling to life even in the face of hunger, sickness, and war. And perhaps even now, when we sit at our own table centuries later, we carry a quiet echo of that truth. Every loaf, every bowl, every spice we add to our cooking is part of a story that began long before us, a story written in both hardship and wonder. So, as you rest now, imagine the flicker of a candle on a wooden board, the soft steam rising from a simple bowl of broth, the murmur of voices long faded. Let that image soothe you, like a lullaby of the past. For history, dear listener, is not only in books. It is in the bread we break, the meals we share, the very act of sitting together at a table. And as the night deepens, let us close our eyes and give thanks for food that nourishes, for stories that endure, and for the quiet comfort of knowing that even the hardest times, like the Middle Ages themselves, have passed, leaving behind lessons that still warm us today. Good night.